First, I'm very honored to have Chief Banks and Chief Kimble, the two chiefs from the two biggest cities in my district. My district is made up of Bell and Williamson County. And each of these gentlemen are chief of police. Chief Banks is the chief of police in Round Rock, which is my hometown. Chief Kimble is the chief of police in Killeen, and that's where my son started his first coaching job at Killeen Ellison. So I got a history with both those cities, and proud of it. And I really do appreciate both of you gentlemen coming forward. We got a funny time we're living in right now. We've got a pandemic. We've got some crisis in cities all around the country. We've got violence. We've got illness. We've got a lot of things we can talk about. And I wanted to talk about it as it relates to us. In our two counties, what you do, and how we can maybe have ideas as we discuss this that other people can pick up in other cities and in other counties around the country. So we're going to do this. We're going to put it out for the people to see. And I really appreciate you being here to do this. You know, both of you know I was a district judge in Williamson County for 20 years. I dealt with both departments right here that we're dealing with. And I've dealt with police officers, very proudly dealt with police officers in both counties now for over 40 years. I highly respect both of your profession and the men and women that risk their lives every day doing things that a lot of people don't even think about. I'd like each of you to introduce yourselves to the people that are going to be watching this. Give us a little of your background as to how you got where you are. And then we're going to talk about a bunch of questions people have given me and we put together. We're going to talk about how to make it better. So let's start. Chief Banks, I'll ask you to introduce yourself, tell everybody how you got here, and then Chief Kimble, after he gets through, would you do that, please?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me here with you and having these conversations. I think it's very important. I remember when you and I first sat down together, Judge, in 2014, when I first came over to Round Rock, and one of the things that I'll never forget is you said when I take over as chief that I needed to make sure I took care of our community, and that was a promise that I made to you and a guarantee, and you know I will continue to uphold that promise I made to you because it was important. And it still is important that we take care of everybody in our community, and you wanted to make sure that was done. So I appreciate that conversation. I am Alan Banks, and I have been here in Round Rock now since March of 2014. I'm 28 years law enforcement, retired out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, born and raised there, went to the police department as a cadet, and retired there as an interim chief of police in 2014. So I'm very, very honored and excited the fact that we have a very good police department, and I really enjoy what we're doing here as a police department, and I hope that we continue on and going down a path of the community involvement and working with great folks in our community in a partnership. Thank you.
Chief Kimble.
Good. Hello, everyone, and it's good to see you again, Congressman. I enjoy our visits here to Fort Hood, and I think we've spent a few times there at events there, and I remember some things you told me also to take care of of Killeen and take care of the soldiers here at Fort Hood. So, and we are doing our level best at that. A little bit about me. My name is Charles Kimble. I am originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I started my police career at the Milwaukee Police Department back in 1991. This will be my 28th year of policing also. 28 years, going my 29th year. And spent a few years in my hometown of Milwaukee. I married a service member. That brought us to Fort Bragg, where I spent the majority of my police career, and I left there as an assistant chief. Worked at a few other police departments there in North Carolina before I took this wonderful job with some of the greatest heroes around here in Killeen and Fort Hood area. I've been here since September of 2017. It's been an amazing journey, you know, working with some of the best warriors our country has to offer. I've had the luxury of policing in Fayetteville and Fort Bragg and Fort Hood, two of the largest military installations here in the United States, and it's been very rewarding. And I look forward to working with you, Congressman, and my.
There you are, Chief. Can you see us?
I can.
God.
There he is.
Our first question is, dealing with the pandemic is unusual for a police issue, but it had to have a major effect on both of your departments. We want you to talk, each of you to talk with us about what you had to do to deal with the pandemic. And let's start with Chief Banks. You already heard the question. You can be able to think about it.
So for us in the pandemic, obviously we were essential personnel. So my employees were required to come to work. And when I say my employees, really it was all of them. And there was we didn't differentiate between our sworn personnel and non-sworn personnel. Everybody came to work, but what we did is, you know, we made sure that we talked about what PPE gear was that we needed, how to use it, how to decontaminate our vehicles. We worked with the fire department, the emergency operations center, emergency management, operations management, to try to figure out how to handle this thing. This was unique for everybody. I mean, we just don't see this every day all the time. So it's just a matter of how do we handle this on the law enforcement side. One of the things that we did have to change up is our response to medical calls. And normally we respond to medical calls of a person that is deceased, sick, need help of that nature. What we decided is that the fire go in first. If there was no potential of danger, let them handle it, and then we would come in after if needed to do an investigation. And so it was just really learning how to tackle this pandemic. Then we worked into allowing our civilian staff that could really work from home, giving them that opportunity, and working with our city's IT to get them set up to work from home. And kind of just adjusting how we used to do normal business, because I don't think we do normal business anymore as a result of the pandemic. We had a couple of scares of coming into contact with people who were positive. We put some of our officers on quarantine to ensure that they were safe and their families were safe, and the rest of the department was safe and didn't catch COVID. And so again, every single day I think was a learning process for us, but I think we handled it very well. And we got everybody through it. I did not have one person on our department that contracted COVID-19. We did do antibody testing, and as a result, we had one person in our department that came back with antibodies, but that person never knew that they had COVID. And so we were blessed in regards to that. But I think we learned quite a bit from this process, but we also learned the fact that we were able to work with other entities within the city of Round Rock and the county of Williams County as well.
Chief, a similar story? Chief Kimble?
Absolutely. You know, when you go to the police chief's manual, there isn't a section that says how to handle a pandemic. So we were literally learning everything on the fly. But I tried to stay to some truths as best I can. One, how do we assist our medical people in keeping the community safe? Our number one function. And then our second function, my second function was, how do I keep the department safe? So we having that mindset in mind literally every day, even today still, became very challenging. Then the third was, how do we keep police operations as normal as possible? How can we still respond? There was still crime. There was still police services that were needed here in Killeen. So as we kept those three principles in mind, we think we did well. We did have 3 employees that test police personnel that tested positive. And we had another employee that we presumed that person was positive based on the circumstances. So as you can imagine, that was challenging. because now my concern is that spreading throughout the department. We put things in place like Chief Banks did. We started to work mobily. We work from home. We had split shifts. We're trying to limit our exposure to each other, which is strange in the police world because we have to work together to for the community. And Killeen, we really prided ourselves on community outreach, on getting our message out, changing the narrative, telling our story, and we couldn't do that anymore because we literally went from out in the community, talking to people, solving problems, to going behind closed doors and to such. So it was very difficult. We're still trying to keep that trust and accountability, trying to keep all that stuff going was very trying, but I think we came out on top. We still have some challenges as we move forward. I didn't know what Zoom was 2 months ago, but it's part of doing business now. So we are in ever-changing times, and a good thing we have to adjust, adapt, and overcome.
And part of that adaptation and overcoming that for us, Congressman Carter, and it was very difficult, is us as law enforcement, we're getting guidelines from the federal government, we're getting guidelines from the state, and we're getting guidelines from county of how to police this pandemic. And everybody, stay at home, stay safe. You couldn't do this. You're essential. You're not essential. So it was difficult for us in law enforcement to try to assist our public or the community in deciphering all those messages. It really wasn't about an enforcement action. It's about keeping our citizens safe, and to include ourselves as well, which was difficult because we had to change the way we did business. I don't know about Chief Kimble's, but we didn't have briefings anymore where we can come and talk about what was going on in the cities. We had our officers respond directly from their homes. And so it was tough for us because we weren't around each other quite a bit. And it's just a new way of doing business. So I just think handling the pandemic was challenging, very challenging, but I think we now we have somewhat of a playbook. I pray this doesn't ever happen again, but now in that Chief's book, we have a little bit of what to do and how to handle it going forward.
Well, I turned on the TV this morning. Texas has got an increase.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to shut down anymore. I really don't believe we're going to do that. But we're still going to have the challenges, I'm afraid. You guys have to closely interact with a lot of people, and it's difficult. We're very fortunate that our police officers, more of them didn't come down with the virus, because
true.
It's the nature of your business to interact with the public.
Yes.
And you never know who you're interacting with, or what kind of person they're doing, or whether they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing at home. You just don't know. And you got to be careful.
True.
Both of you guys have been around about 30 years. In the last 30 years, policing has made a lot of adjustments and changes. Let's talk about some of the things you've seen as you've worked your way up to being the chief of police, in the way we police, that before and after, good, bad. Let's talk about some of the methods we use now. As you both know, because you've seen what I have done in Congress, I'm a big believer in training, and I've spent an awful lot of money funding active shooter programs and things like that, so that we have to train officers available in our district. And I hope everybody, I'm sure you have, and I know from experience in the Fort Hood shooting, that active shooter training made a big difference in the response to the Fort Hood shooting. And so let's talk about a little bit about your history and what you've seen change in policing and where we might need to change.
For sure. Chief Kimble, go ahead.
Congressman, the biggest thing I've seen, when I started back in the early 90s, we were on the forefront of technology. We were just putting mobile data terminals in cars. Now there's smart watches and GPS satellites and things like that. And we have to embrace I sound kind of strange saying this, but when it comes to policing, I'm an old timer. When I look, and I don't mean any disrespect, but I look at the kids that we're hiring, the 22, 23-year-olds, they are just light years ahead of me when it comes to technology. But we have to learn how to embrace it, because the public uses the technology. If we want to do outreach to the community, we have to embrace that technology. It's a new way of doing business. When Chief Banks and I started, it was all community watch meetings. We call it going knee to knee. We went knee to knee with people and we talked to them, but that's not how people communicate. A lot of our public doesn't communicate like that. They communicate in short text messages. They communicate with video, streaming, online streaming. We're doing streaming today. So we just have to embrace technology, and not only embrace it, we have to look to what is next, because there's a new next out there, and we have to embrace that and find out what it is so we can stay ahead, because surely the criminals are finding out what that is. So we have to find out what that is and get ready for it.
I agree. Chief Banks?
And definitely technology is a change that we've seen in 30 years. I mean, you look at cybersecurity, a lot of crimes are being done now through the internet. And so now we have to have specialized units to even deal with that. Technology is absolutely huge. To cell phones, it's exactly what Chief Kimble has said. But some of the change that I've seen in 30 years has been even some of the tools and how we train our officers as well. Now we're having, 30 years ago, we didn't have tasers. Now we have tasers. We have different means of less lethal force. It used to be shoot and no shoot type scenario training. Now we're doing reality-based training, which is absolutely essential. When you talk about active shooter training, it's more than just the active shooter training, which is absolutely important, but it's also training to deal with people with autism, people with disabilities, and how to react in certain situations. And, I believe 100% that training is essential and it's needed. We didn't have that 30 years ago. It was, as a 21-year-old kid, I have a 22-year-old son right now, and there's no way I'd have him in the police department because I don't see his maturity level. And he's a great kid, he's a bright kid, and he's working for a technology company right now. But see, when I started at 20 and 21 years old and where we were at back then to where we're at right now, in regards to policing is absolutely much, much different. It should be much different because it has to evolve, and it evolves around what our community and where our community is at this point. And I agree with Chief Kimble is that we are going to have to, there's going to be something else, something that will be new to us, and we have to learn it.
What's the largest change that you've seen in the last 6 months?
The largest change in the last 6 months is probably a change of mindset. Traditionally, we have trained and taught our officers. We've kind of been in this service role, but the service role, as Chief Banks alluded to earlier, was turned to medical very quickly. We went from using our PPE for PPE related calls to using it all the time. So it's a change of mindset that the service that we provide to the community is sometimes out of the realm what is traditional law enforcement. It is medical calls. We were checking on elderly people because that was the service that the community needed. So we found ourselves in a service role and taking some of our law enforcement hat off. So, and I suspect that role will continue. It's just something that we have to train and equip our officers for, because it's a skill. It's a skill that it's another skill that we have to learn how to do. I know that law enforcement will adapt. That's what we do. We adapt to a lot of situations, and adapting to that service role, that medical role. When we train now, we have to train to look for medical related issues, not only law enforcement issues. So we have to, as we train for the future, is how to provide that service, particularly in a medical type setting.
And with that being changed over the last 6 months, the community is also realize that there are some services that they can do without and or to. Some of it's the essentials. I mean, it was nice seeing the neighborhood full of people walking or bike riding and walking by and waving at each other. And we didn't see that 6 months ago. Everybody was in this busy world. They're either at work, they're at school, or in the gym somewhere, and you just didn't see all your neighbors outside. So I think we got the opportunity to see who our neighbors were and start those relationships. And then the law enforcement side, absolutely agree with Chief Kimble, is some of that is trying to adapt to what is now, the term that everybody's using, the new norm. And our police services had to change quite a bit because we became the default police prior, which everybody called us everything, to now what are some of the essential calls for service that we don't have to respond to? People can call in and do a report over the telephone, or medical services as opposed to law enforcement. And so I think we'll continue to see some of those changes going forward.
So the medical side of it has really been a concentration for the last 6 months. It's been pretty clear. It figures to do that. You train, it says, if I understand correctly, about scenarios. We just talked about medical scenarios, but you train for other scenarios too. You feel scenario training is good and is effective? And do you see some scenarios you're going to have to create based upon the current events that are going on in the country?
I believe in reality-based scenario training. I think it gives the officer a more realistic, gives them more realistic training, as opposed to looking at a video screen and emulating that scenario. But with that reality-based training, I truly believe that you have to bring in folks from the outside, whether actors or just your community members, to be a part of that. People with different disabilities, people with different needs, people that don't look like you. I think they need to be a part of that reality-based training. One is it helps them understand as well, but two, it gives the officer a different perspective than just looking at a screen. And going forward, I think it's essential. I think it's going to continue to help law enforcement if they stick with the reality-based training. It should never just be a shoot, no shoot type scenario. You should be able to train in de-escalation and the matrix of a use of force type use of force scenarios.
Yeah, as you know, sir, we are the agency that certifies us TCO, TCO, and the TCO was good when it was created. You answer a question, you take a test, and you pass, you fail, or you show proficiency in doing something. I think with the reality-based or scenario-based, it's all about decision making. I think and that's where we fill in the gap locally. We get our TCO certification. Now we have to add some reality or scenario-based training in that. So now we have to see how you solve problems. Problem-based training or decision-based training is absolutely needed. We do it here at the Killeen Police Department. We go above and beyond the TCO standard, but we have to make that investment in our officers early in their career so they can master those skills once they get out in the street.
Yes, sir. Well, you're in the human relations business, and you have to relate to all kinds of human beings, good, bad, and ugly. I mean, it's just the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just even the human relations, it's also a customer service based, and that we are in that business as well. But we have to understand that it is problem solving, and split second decisions have to be made, but the right ones have to be made in all these cases.
When it comes to the federal government, I think we can generally say what our interaction with local law enforcement is from the point of funding the various programs, and which I totally believe in. What do you think the federal government, should it be expanded to where, well, I'll tell you my opinion on everything. I think local's better than national. I think you can't sit there in Washington and talk about Killeen, Texas, or Round Rock, Texas, and have anybody but maybe 2 or 3 people even understand what you're talking about. Maybe they've never even heard of us. And yet we're trying to pass rules and regulations at a federal level that don't fit every pattern of policing all over the United States. So I like those decisions to be made local and state, but not at the federal level. But we are having, we've got a crime bill right now going to the floor with a lot of stuff in it that's going to be telling people how to run their business. And I have a lot of problems with that. But if you don't, I want to hear if you think the federal government has a place where they need to send national directives to police departments.
I think when you look at what you talked about there, sir, is that how can the federal government help? The one thing that talking to city managers and mayors is that when it comes to funding and training law enforcement and emergency management personnel, it's pricey. And it puts a strain on our budget here at the police department. And of course, we have to coordinate that with my boss, the city manager. But police departments and emergency services is a huge part of any budget, particularly municipal budget. And where we could have the help is that if we can use some of that federal money for that, so we can ease some of our training dollars. We need scenario-based training. We have to have it. We have to teach our officers how to do problem solving. We have to be ready when technology hits. We can't catch up because things move very quickly. And if we find ourselves in a catch-up mode, we'll never get right. So trying to stay ahead, trying to use those resources that the federal government has when it comes to training, putting us on the same level with our federal partners when it comes to technology training and training in technology and law enforcement. That's where we need that immediate help that if I had to ask what can the federal government do, that would be help us train the our local officers.
Training dollars. Yeah. Chief?
And I'd agree with that. Absolutely, Judge. Is training is important, and part of that training, we talked about reality-based training, and part of reality-based training comes with cultural diversity. The topic that's going on right now, talking about racial equality and so on, and that's the type of training that we are trying to instill in our officers. And I talk for Round Rock, and I will specifically say that that's the type of training we're trying to instill in our officers from day one that they start. And that helps. And we have a huge budget in our city's, a huge part of our city's budget that we could use that help, or any department, I would say probably needs help in that's part of it.
I think you both know that I'm co-chair of the Army Caucus, because I have the largest Army post in the world in my district. And whenever we talk about cutting military, you cut the Navy, you cut big tickets. You cut the Army, you cut people. That's the way it works. There are no big tickets like aircraft carriers or in the Navy or in the Air Force, a very expensive airplane. If you're going to cut things when you're dealing with the Army, it's the individuals, and that's the biggest expense we have is our soldiers. So when people start talking about cutting budgets, there's a lot of issues. They're talking about defunding things. And defunding things means defunding people. And I hope the American public can be convinced of that when you cut money to police forces, the only thing they can cut is people. And that means less response time, less protection, less safety. And I'm very opposed to doing those things. I think we've got an issue with bad cops. We're going to figure out how to find those bad cops and deal with them. That kind of training we ought to spend our money on, not cutting our police forces and making our country not safe. That's my opinion. I'd like it, but y'all have.
It's great opinion. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, some of that, and I could tell you, just I call us sometimes the default police. And that's because anytime somebody needs something, has a question, has an issue, they always call the police, and we become that responding agency. You know, we've received calls, and I was just telling the story the other day. We'll receive, a lady called us because our son wouldn't do his homework and wanted to come out to his house. I mean, why, you know, we become that default police for every single issue. We shouldn't be called for every single issue. Even when we talk about mental health issues, which is growing and growing here in the United States, probably all over the world. But if we don't have the resources to help folks that are in crisis or need the help so they don't get in crisis, the family members will call us because they have no other choice or issue, and so they feel like they need to call us in that. So when you talk about defunding or not funding law enforcement or personnel, I think we need to look at why are we responding to so many different calls when we should be looking at what resources can we use to help our community as opposed to cutting the police department. Let's start looking at those resources and see if we can get those resources in place, and let us sit at the table and help you with that.
Absolutely. You know, over the years, you know, police departments, you know, particularly in my almost 30 years of doing it, you know, we have learned to say yes. If you call us, we will come. We will help you figure the problem out. But what has happened, like Chief Banks has said, is that we find ourselves people wanting our services for non-police related matters. We get the same calls that Chief Banks get. You know, my son won't wake up, he won't go to school, he won't listen to me, and those things are social issues that we as police find ourselves in the middle of. Now, we are trained to help people, and we will try our best to help you. But if you want us to help you do things outside of the things we're trained for, either someone else is going to have to help us with these issues, or you're going to have to train us and give us the resources to do it.
Yeah, that's a real difficult problem. I'm sure glad my dad didn't call the police when I didn't do my homework. A lot of trouble. Well, on the issue of race relations, this is, you know, we've got Seattle has just surrendered a portion of their city to a group of people that they're going to let them live there forever, I guess. This doesn't seem to be letting up. And we've got to address it, but we've got to address it in a smart way, not an emotional way. I think a whole lot of that is dealing with the culture of and correct me if I'm wrong, the culture of the police department is very similar to the culture of the infantry. You're a team, you protect your team. You don't leave any of your people on the battlefield. You rescue your injured. You are a operation as a team, and the police force is a team. In turn, we have the same issues in the military. Bad behavior is not always reported up the line because that's part of the team. And so let's address that issue if it is an issue. But it seems to me it's very similar to what we had. Why didn't somebody tell us what was going on with that doctor at Fort Hood? Because he was a major, that's why. That's why they didn't do it. It's just as simple as that. And I tried to get legislation to say, if you're a whistleblower in the Army, it doesn't hurt your career. But nobody believes it. They still think it does. So I'd like to raise that issue with you.
You know, in any organization, whether it be police or if you're running a business, there's a culture inside of that organization. And one of the things that we have to do, Chief Banks and I, as leaders of police organizations, if a personality of the culture exists, which is harmful to the public and harmful to our organizations, we have to let people know that you have to be bold, and you have to protect the organization. You have to protect I tell everybody, the Killeen Police Department is a living thing. It lives. I'm here for a brief while. It's been here since the 1800s. I'm here for a brief amount of time, and I will move on. There will be somebody else. But this organization will move on, and you have to protect it for the time you're here. So for those who don't understand the culture, we as police leaders have to make bold decisions. And for those who find themselves outside of the culture, who do wrong, who lie, who people can't trust, they live outside of our accountability standards, we have to remove them. And you have to be bold in your decisions that you can't work here. Not only can you not work here, what we have to work on is that you can't work in our profession. Our profession is an honorable profession. And if you lie, you steal, you cheat, you're not going to leave Killeen and go to Round Rock. You're not going to go to Round Rock and go somewhere else. Absolutely. We have to hold everybody accountable for those actions and make sure they move on and they go work, washing cars, whatever else you do. But you can't live in this honorable profession and do dishonorable things.
And, you know, my whole career, I've heard the thin blue line, and you know, you hear that, and people aren't, if you're in that thin blue line, you're not gonna break that thin blue line. You're not gonna go against what you told. And it was a culture, but I think that culture of a thin blue line should be about taking care of this community and doing the right thing and honoring this profession. And we have to talk to our employees and assure our employees that by them coming forward and to let us know about dishonorable behavior, that's part of that thin blue line, and that's what it's about. And you talk about whistleblower, to me, it's not, that's just more than just whistleblowing. That is honoring this profession, and that's stepping up and taking care of your department, your city, your community. And we can't look at them as the rats or the snitches. Those folks, you know, we have to weed out the bad apples, and we have to weed out those folks that don't deserve to be in this profession. And we have to continue to push to let employees know it's okay to say something. You know, in law enforcement, we have that term, see something, say something. And really, we tell our public that, we have to start instilling that within our own house. You see something, you need to say something. And we don't need to punish those who come forward. We need to honor those who come forward and help us clean our own house. Additionally, on top of that, as Chief Kimble was talking about, is if we terminate a person for conduct, for untruthfulness, for dishonoring this profession, why are we allowing those gypsy cops to go from agency to agency to agency? Because you're not changing their heart. You're just moving the problem. And we need to stop that problem. They do need to go out and figure out another way of employment, but it should not be in this profession or any other profession, as far as I'm concerned. And until we start doing that, we're going to continue to have the same problem that exists.
What about a national registry? That's one idea that's being discussed.
A database, yeah.
If you got a national database, you know, I did a national registry for illnesses that nobody knew what they were. And a mother came to me in Georgetown and said, my son finally died, and we never could find out what was wrong with him. There was no place I could go to find out, did anybody else in the world have these symptoms? And what did you do? So we got a national registry for undiagnosed diseases. We could do a national registry, and we have a national registry for sex offenders. I can remember cases I tried where people went to prison, being a sex offender, and then went straight back to Colorado and got in the daycare business. Okay, when we created a national registry for those people, hopefully that didn't happen, because people that run in daycares would look and find out if these people had any history. So we could do that for law enforcement, and I think it's going to be discussed. I'd like each of you to comment on what you think about it.
Judge, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a push in law enforcement that we wanted to be known as a profession. This just wasn't a job. We wanted it to be known as a profession. I want to be a professional law enforcement official. So, but that comes with things. Sure, it comes with some higher pay and some educational requirements. But if you are a dentist, if you're a doctor, if you are a profession, if you're a lawyer, there's a place where you can go and you can go check the bar, the bar association. You check for if you are a doctor, you can go to the medical registry and check complaints and things against you. If we are going to hold ourselves as law enforcement professionals, I agree there should be a registry that should go to and check certain things to include our discipline.
Absolutely. I can't answer that better than myself. Why don't we have one? Why don't we have one? 100% agree.
Well, I'm for that too. So I'll work on that. But I know it's already being suggested. I will certainly co-sponsor it if it's being done right. If not, I'll write it myself because I've done it now twice. I believe in that. I believe that we should be able to know where the bad apples are and keep them out of places where they shouldn't be.
Absolutely.
And
yes, sir.
it doesn't make any sense at all for a guy to be a bad apple in Killeen or in Round Rock and go 5 counties away and become a sheriff deputy. It's not a good idea.
Not at all.
We got to.
All we're doing is pushing the problem.
So here's a interesting question. What type of training do you go through to be a chief of police? Both basically were promoted to be chief of police. What kind of training do you go to?
Yeah, I'll start. My training started, basic training, started with an academy almost 28, 29 years ago, where you learn the basics of this job. The state of Wisconsin, the state of North Carolina, and the state of Texas, you have certain in-service or ongoing, or as in most professionals call it, they have in-service things that you have to do. And I have done those things for the last 28 years, met the standards of 3 different state agencies. In addition, the state of Texas has police chiefs training. So we get to, Alan and I get to meet and we talk about things that affect us at the executive level. So the state of Texas does a great job of allowing us to make our in-service training and our executive training. We both belong to professional organizations to police the Texas Police Chiefs Texas Police Chiefs, and we get training there also. We get to meet. We get to talk about things that's going on in Central Texas. We get to go talk about things that's going on in West Texas, what's going on down at the beach, and we find that we have the same problems, and we get to talk to each other. That informal training is so invaluable. Unfortunately, COVID stopped some of that, but we know we're looking forward to getting back and doing that training again. But the state of Texas does an excellent job of making sure that its police officers and police chiefs get the necessary training.
Right.
Sam Houston State, they have they help with the Commission on Law Enforcement, TCOL, our state mandated training for all sworn police officers. So we are required to maintain a certain number of hours every 2 years, and we have to maintain that. It's mandatory for us. If we don't, then we can lose our certification. Then that goes with Chief Kimble was saying, the additional training that we take above and beyond what the requirements are. Plus, we get that opportunity to sit with each other, even outside of training, and talk with not only the national trends, local trends, and national, what's happening. I mean, one thing that I think is important, I think you should be to have those relationships with your surrounding chiefs or executives of agencies to talk about the issues and problems that are going on in our region, in our area. Because those same trends, the trends that's happening in Round Rock, I guarantee the majority of those trends are going to be happening over in Killeen. And we get to talk about that. That to me, that's part of that getting together and training and learning from each other to do best practices in our profession.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and training is important. In fact, we were talking about training dollars. Is there anything else that you feel like that the federal government could help with? We could get a registry, we could do training, training dollars, and encourage training programs, including diversity training and all the other things. Is there anything else that you can think of, either one of you, that you need to mention right now?
For me, I think those are the big ticket items. Everything that you just hit on is what we talked about. I don't see anything further. I'm sure there are others depending on who you talk to, but for me, those are my big ticket items.
Same here, Judge. Those are some huge big ticket items. The other one being equipment. For us in our profession, it takes a lot. I don't know if you've been inside of a police car lately. About time you buy the police car and you outfit it with the radios and satellites and computers, it becomes you could turn a $35,000 car into an $80,000 car
Easy.
Very quickly. And we have to have them. And we cannot not have police cars. And they are a strain on our budgets at times. So any help with that, along with the training, the associated equipment that we need to do our jobs would help us out in this.
Here's a question from way in the past when I used to be a judge. Is all the communication systems now interactive, where everybody can talk to everybody else? You know, for a while, one radio operation couldn't talk to another radio operation. Is that all working pretty good now?
For us, it is. We're able to talk to other agencies within our region, whether it's down in Austin or some of the smaller agencies around here, and even DPS. So you're absolutely right. When you weren't able to get on somebody else's channel and something was happening, you just didn't know about it until you heard the news or the friends who are in different agencies talk to each other. But I think we're doing very well right now in our region, in our area.
Okay.
Yeah, the interoperability in Central Texas is very good also.
That's good. Now here's a tough one. We'll make this the last question. How do you envision policing will be done in your grandchildren's generation? You ever thought about that?
To me, I have. And I think a lot of the policing now is really going to be the technology-based policing. I think a lot of it is going to be based on computers and phones and iPads and so on and so forth. Because I think the majority of that is going in the direction. But I hope, in my vision, or maybe it's my dream, that a lot of it also is going to be sitting at the table and talking and having that community involvement and the community partners out there that will really help police themselves. And we reduce the amount of calls for service that law enforcement has to go to or respond to. But you look at some of the movies, a lot of the movies now, when you talk futuristic, I truly believe that's the way law enforcement is going to be. And it's really, I have grandchildren first, and I'm not pushing, so I don't worry too much about it.
I do have grandchildren. I got a 7-year-old and a 5-month-old, and one on the way. But when I think about how it could be for my granddaughter who's 7, if she comes in this profession, 20 years from now, maybe not. Again, technology one, but I think how we choose police officers are going to change. I think now when Chief Banks and I started, and I have to check my policies, but we prided ourselves on being a paramilitary organization where you had a rank structure, you took orders and things like that. I think we're probably moving to something more as we're going to see recruiting hometown people that know the community, and you're going to see. I think there's going to be a push to hire intellectuals. I think that your problem-solving people, I think there's going to be a higher expectation of education from law enforcement in the future. I think you're going to see PhD people on staff help solving more of social issues that will pop up. I think police will find themselves in that service role, but I see them heavily involved with local universities, with PhDs in the social sciences, things like that. I think that's going to be the future of law enforcement.
Very interesting, very interesting. I grew up in Houston, Texas. I was born and raised in Houston. I'm older than both of you. And My dad used to say that when I was a child, everybody went out right at dusk in the summertime and sat on the front porch and visited with the neighbors all up and down the street. And people just walked around. Why? No television and no air conditioning.
Right,
That is,
right.
air conditioning and television ended neighborhood conversations. And they're getting in with the computers and everything else is even getting worse. And I'm like you, I still hope human interaction is going to be part of the program. Gentlemen, I am honored to have been with you guys. I respect both of you very, very much. You're great, great law enforcement officers. I'm very proud to have you in my district. And my door is always open. My phone's always available. Do not hesitate to contact me on anything I can do to help you. God bless each of you. We got a